following a disastrous performance in Thursday night's presidential debate. President Joe Biden is facing a flood of calls from Democratic pundits and strategists to step aside and make way for a different Democratic nominee amid real doubts that he is fit to defeat former President Donald Trump in November. Biden's time at the debate was full of non sequiturs, rhetorical errors, off-topic asides, and extended pauses to gather his thoughts. He spoke quietly and with a scratchy throat. His aides say he had a cold. Overall, his performance only added fuel to existing concerns about his age and ability to perform his duties. To be clear, Trump's performance was a horror too. It was full of outright lies and rambling incoherence as well. He once again made clear that he poses a grave threat to us democracy, which is, in part, why some Democrats are saying Biden must step aside and allow a stronger candidate to lead the party in November. Replacing Biden as the Democratic nominee would be difficult, but not impossible, as my colleague Christian Poss writes. It would require Biden himself to direct delegates at the convention this summer to vote for someone else and hand over his campaign funds. No party operative can force him out. On Friday, Biden indicated that he does not intend to drop out and remains committed to a second debate in September. But if Biden changes his mind, there is a roster of potential candidates who could replace him, the most obvious being Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris would be the most practical alternative to Biden. Voters have already grappled with the notion that Harris is just one 81-year-old heartbeat away from becoming president. Only a little over a third of voters said in a September CBS News YouGov poll that they thought Biden would complete a second term. When up against other Democratic presidential contenders, she performs well. A June Morning Consult Politico poll of registered voters found that 21% would want her to be the nominee if Biden weren't running. More than any other candidate, she'd be the easiest person to swap in, as she could also pick up campaigning right where Biden left off. Unlike other potential contenders to replace Biden, she could start using his campaign funds immediately because she's already on the presidential ticket. Otherwise, Biden would have to transfer his funds to the Democratic National Committee, which would then disperse them to another candidate. The Biden campaign has also been trying to boost Harris's profile by sending her on a tour of the country to talk about abortion rights, a key issue that has contributed to Democratic victories in elections from North Carolina to Kansas in the years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And since Trump's criminal conviction, she's proved capable of going on the offensive, leveraging her experience as the former San Francisco District Attorney and California Attorney General. These facts, however, may not be enough to overcome the fact that Harris is unpopular, even relative to her predecessors as vice president. Her net disapproval rating is currently about 49%, according to 538's polling average. That's better than Biden's disapproval rating of 56%, but he's also historically unpopular, and Harris would be running on the same record as Biden. Moreover, the Morning Consult Politico poll found that just a third of voters and 3 in 5 Democrats believe it's likely that she would win an election as the Democratic nominee. This is partially a result of the White House's failure in the first half of Biden's presidency to give her the kind of exposure that might have boosted those numbers, instead giving her a portfolio that included the ever-intractable issue of immigration. That reportedly contributed to tensions between her office and the White House. Attacks on Harris, the first woman, the first black woman, and the first South Asian vice president, have also been colored with sexism and racism, as former White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain has noted. Replacing Biden with Harris, therefore, would require the Democratic establishment to go all in on her in a way they have yet to do. The other possible contenders to replace Biden, if not Harris, a Biden replacement, could also come from the bench of talent that Democrats have been eyeing for 2028. California Gov. Gavin Newsom, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Michigan Gov. Gretchen Whitmer, and Illinois Gov. J.B. Pritzker. However, when asked about whether they would be willing to step in, they have demurred so far, which is as expected given all of them have been strong Biden surrogates. In the Morning Consult Politico poll, Newsom and Buttigieg came second after Harris as favored Democratic presidential contenders with 10% support. Whitmer came in third with 4% support. Pritzker was not polled. Newsom, Whitmer, and Pritzker also have strong approval ratings in their states. Gavin Newsom's recent debate with Florida Gov. Ron DeSantis has boosted his national profile. His record includes further protecting reproductive rights in California, clearing homeless encampments, phasing out gas-powered vehicles, expanding healthcare for undocumented immigrants, imposing a death penalty moratorium, enacting police reforms, and more. But his tenure as governor hasn't been without challenges. He's faced multiple recall campaigns, and the state is reeling from a multi-billion-dollar deficit that required deep budget cuts this year. Gretchen Whitmer led Democrats to win majorities in both chambers of the Michigan legislature in the midterms. In the years since, she has worked to shore up abortion rights, expand LGBTQ rights, implement stricter gun safety measures, take aggressive climate action, institute free universal preschool, and reverse policies like a right-to-work law that hurt union membership and was previously implemented by the Michigan GOP. J.B. Pritzker, who has a multi-billion-dollar fortune, may have a strategic advantage in being less reliant on donors to fund a bid for president. He balanced his state's budget and enacted a progressive agenda that included a $45 billion infrastructure plan, increased the hourly minimum wage to $15 by 2025, expanded Medicaid coverage to undocumented seniors, transitioned the state to 100% clean energy by 2050, and more. His state will host the Democratic National Convention this summer. Pete Buttigieg made his mark during the 2020 presidential campaign, essentially coming in third after Biden and Sen. Bernie Sanders, DVT. As Transportation Secretary, he's overseen the implementation of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill passed in 2021, sought to improve road safety and address pandemic-related supply chain disruptions. But he's also come under heavy scrutiny over a series of high-profile train derailments and widespread flight delays and cancellations, though has since made efforts to hold airlines accountable. But the public is still broadly unfamiliar with these rising stars in the Democratic Party. With only months before the election, it may be late to introduce them now, even setting aside the tricky logistics at the convention. But voters might also be content to cast their ballot for someone who isn't Biden or Trump. Previously, a generic Democrat has polled significantly better than Biden against Trump. What about Kamala? If President Joe Biden decides to drop out of the presidential race, it appears likely that his replacement at the top of the ticket would be his running mate, Vice President Kamala Harris. Until this week, that possibility wasn't really worth pondering too much. But after Biden's disastrous performance during Thursday night's debate, Harris becoming the Democratic nominee is suddenly a more serious hypothetical. Before considering what that would actually look like, it's helpful to take stock of her vice presidency and vice presidential candidacy so far. Despite frequent criticisms and confusion surrounding what exactly her job is, she is now emerging as an indispensable surrogate and defender, and maybe even successor. She hasn't been a particularly groundbreaking vice president, but she has had moments on the campaign trail, albeit overlooked by the public and the press, when she is able to showcase her value. It's a preview of how her role could change in the coming months and even years, whether or not Biden steps aside. Thursday night was one of those times. As shocked and panicked reactions from Democratic operatives and the political press began to pour in post-debate, Harris was dispatched to defend Biden on CNN and MSNBC. She admitted that Biden had a slow start, but rounded that answer off by playing up a strong finish by the president. She went on offense, attacking Trump for his many lies during the debate and emphasizing Trump's statements in defense of the January 6 insurrection and refusal to accept the results of the election. In the process, she surprised a host of pundits who wondered why the White House has kept her under wraps for 3 years. The answer is complicated. Harris's vice presidency has been muted by design, unlike Biden's tenure under former President Barack Obama. Harris's role as vice president has been low-key. For most of her term, she's been relegated to warm-up speaker and occasional Biden stand-in, delivering remarks at White House events with the president, attending summits and visiting foreign leaders when Biden is needed in D.C. or on another trip, or, like Thursday night, brought in to do cleanup. Many of those backseat responsibilities have been due to the nature of the vice presidency, a constitutional office without any clear authorities beyond being a spare body in the event the president can't do his job and being an extra vote when the U.S. Senate is evenly tied. But some of it appears to have been intentional. Vice presidents have exerted influence and power before. Vice President Dick Cheney essentially ran foreign policy for a few years during George W. Bush's first term. Biden himself was given a large mandate by Obama during the government's response to the Great Recession, administering hundreds of billions of dollars in federal stimulus spending. Harris got no such assignments, despite Biden suggesting that he wanted his second-in-command to be a governing partner during the 2020 campaign season. Questions about this have dogged Harris. Just 9 months into Biden's term, after waves of negative media coverage, public absence, staff departures, and rhetorical missteps which have now become a genre of meme, the White House issued a statement assuring the public that the president did rely on Harris. By that point, the idea that Harris served a superfluous role was already baking into public and media perception. Instead of working on issues like criminal justice reform and policing, her areas of expertise, she took on voting rights, an issue that was doomed to fail in an evenly divided Senate. Her portfolio was then filled with another cursed assignment, dealing with the root causes of migration from Latin America. MAINSTREAM press coverage of that task and Republican framing of it online and in right-wing media made it seem like her job would be dealing with immigration and the southern border. However, that fog made her an easier target for Republicans. Still, something changed in 2022 when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade that summer and eliminated the constitutional right to an abortion. Harris suddenly had a clear lane in which to operate, and she has taken it, being the Biden administration's point person on conservative threats to reproductive rights. Campaign trail Harris has shown how much of an asset she could be post-Dobbs and since the generally successful midterms that followed later that same year. Harris's official role has shifted. She's been on more foreign visits and to gatherings of NATO and allied leaders, headlined a national college tour, and embarked on to other nationwide tour. One this winter dedicated to raising awareness of threats to reproductive freedom. It kicked off on the 51st anniversary of Roe v. Wade and another this spring focused on economic opportunity. The tour, though events run out of the White House, served a campaign function as well. The stops were concentrated in swing states and meant to reach a swath of core Democratic constituencies that Harris may be better positioned to speak to, like young voters and college students, women, Black and Latino Americans, and working-class communities. Unlike Biden, who has been struggling with voters from all of these backgrounds, Harris is a natural communicator in these settings. The change in these official duties has also resulted in a shift in her campaign role, especially as the primary season wrapped up this spring and the general election began. She made history, the White House said, when she visited and toured an abortion clinic in Minneapolis in March, and has since delivered campaign speeches in states that have taken measures to restrict abortion access, like Florida and Arizona, both when the state's top court allowed a century-old abortion ban go into effect, and again on the second anniversary of Dobbs. She's also been zeroing in on other progressive priorities like gun safety, student loan forgiveness, and the war in Gaza. She's been engaging media and giving many more interviews than Biden, appearing as a guest on popular podcasts, TV shows like The Drew Barrymore Show and Jimmy Kimmel Live, and online talk shows to discuss the White House and the Biden campaign's priorities. She's filling the void that Biden has created intentionally because of his age or not because he is also president, governing the country. Thursday night's interviews and whatever appearances she will have to make to defend Biden show us what is likely to come, an expanded role for the VP in this term and a theoretical next. Biden will need it and Democrats should want it in the event that Harris has to step up to win the election, govern the nation, or just be a solid backup, precisely as the vice presidency is supposed to work.